Ragazzi, bentornati qui su The Last of Us. Oggi andremo a fare i livelli perduti, cosa che giustamente potevano anche inserire nella storia, così, però vabbè. Allora, iniziamoli bene. Questo livello viene presentato in versione pre-alpha, incompleta, lo stato in cui si trovava quando è stato tagliato dal gioco. I dialoghi non sono doppiati, ma visualizzati come sottotitoli provvisori. Vabbè, festa di Jackson. Ellie partecipa contro voglia a una festa di Jackson. Abbiamo subito, sono troppo curioso. Sono passati anni. E adesso sono curioso perché sono scene nuove queste. Quindi non saprò nulla. Assolutamente nulla. E io avvio. Commento degli sviluppatori, sì, video introduttivo, sì. Vai, vai, sì, subito.
You're about to play an unfinished level from The Last of Us Part 2. The reason we added this section is there are a few sequences, and we picked the 3 of the best ones, that we cut from the game. You know, often we build a game that's much bigger than what ends up being the final product. They were months away from being finished, but we wanted to give you an insight of what it's like when we built a game, because often we have this whole thing constructed and it doesn't have final art or audio or dialogue. And here you get to see the building blocks of what it's like when we first string a bunch of these levels together. This is the intro to the first deleted level, and this one is the roughest of the 3. We wanted to show more of how Jackson operates. So this is the festival where Ellie ultimately kisses Dina. This sequence would have come very late in the game as a flashback sequence while you're in the farm with Dina. And we wanted to show what is the rest of Jackson doing, and wanted to put on the stick, make it interactive. So you could see when you're outside, there are all these almost like carnival games that you can play. You could mix drinks, you could play with these kids that are playing a sort of clicker Marco Polo, sit down and listen to conversations. And all the different interactions were first or second pass, very, very early passes. The building blocks are there, but nothing is final. And ultimately, while we were very excited by this sequence, it's pretty fun and lighthearted. It just slowed things too much as we're barreling towards the end of the story at this point. So again, reminder, rough, missing audio, missing animation, missing gameplay tweaks, missing dialogue, but pretty representative of what it would have been. So enjoy.
Grazie Neil, grazie Neil. Sono troppo in hype, vediamo un po'. Lungo sospiro. Cazzo avevo in testa? Lei beve. Ellie beve. Ah. Ok.
Originally, this level was going to transition us to farm. We would go all the way through to the dance, where Ellie and Dina share their first kiss. Then we would play through farm, and when Ellie plays the guitar at night, she would remember the Seth incident. So, the opening for this was a little tricky. We needed it to match at least a little what you might expect emotionally coming from prior beats, because we were already purposefully disorienting you in time and space. Remember, you just came from this huge fight. To jump straight into it would have been a little too jarring. After some back and forth, we rooted it in Ellie's nerves, calling back to her hands shaking in the theater. But this time, for a much more innocuous reason we'll find out later. She's nervous because she has a crush on Dina, who is the only reason why she's here at the dance.
Ah. Ok, meno male ci ha fatto tipo un'introduzione di quello che era. Ok, queste qua magari sono tipo i palazzi senza texture. Oh, c'è un altro coso qua, altro commento. Sentiamo un po'.
Something we really wanted to do was highlight the way their lives had turned upside down since she went down this path. We had this idea in all of our usual gameplay mechanics that were designed for really violent ends. The workbench, door bashes, throwable weapons, and even the infected, which is my personal favorite. Peppered throughout the level are moments of levity or shared history, all the while seeing how happy and mundane they all were before her huge revenge odyssey.
Ok. Wow. Wow. E qua? Che c'è qua? È un porcello
We use our
arrostolito.
workbench a lot to make a lot of things that kill and maim and hurt people. Here, we had the silly idea of using the same feel, harkening back to the same animations, using the exact same UI, to instead fix a drink. Like the workbench, you could pick your base, and then you could add something to it. And at the time, we had some different reactions from Ellie based on how strong you chose to make the drink. Something we wanted to prototype, though, before it got cut, was picking up some ingredients around to add, like a lime or maybe a bottle of someone's favorite whiskey or salt, like you were earning upgrades. We also toyed with having Ellie carry around the drink you made and occasionally sip it, psyching herself up to go talk to Dina inside because she's nervous. It got too noodly, though, because she would need to keep placing it somewhere before she did anything, so it would have ended up more trouble than it was worth.
Ah, capito. Ah, ok, premi per creare il bourbon. Non è niente male. Se me lo dico da sola. Ah, quindi queste qua sono varie attività che volevano mettere proprio all'inizio del gioco.
Throwing games. This one, of course, uses our throwable system where you're often chucking explosive things or stunning things, but for a more wholesome purpose, although some people take this game really seriously. A fun aspect of this is if you did well, you could win a toy here. Ellie would place it in her pocket. If you had done this, you'd find the toy with JJ, the baby, later back at the farm. When we cut this, the toy made it through anyway because it was so cute. It is the same one you see on the tractor at the farm. Ollie the elephant.
Ah, ecco lì da dove è nato da qua. Da questo
The makeup
giochino
artist
qui.
is pretty simple. It's one of those little in-game scenes we peppered in to make it feel like Ellie had roots in the town. Hallie, our writer, mentioned that in her mind, an ex-girlfriend of Ellie's tattooed her arm to cover up her scar. So we figured this might be the only time we get to see that. We wanted to hint at it and allude to it and make it feel like there had been so much more that had been happening and so much more that Ellie threw away.
Ah, Scala X! No, vabbè. Quindi diciamo che abbiamo scoperto chi è qua, va bene.
One of my favorite sections because I think that it achieves both the slice of life aspect of Jackson while also being a stark reminder of how dark the world that they live in really is. To attract attention and curiosity, one of the kids was supposed to make this adorable, messed up little clicker impression, and the others would giggle. We tried a version where if you got close enough, the kid might try and follow you a little before turning back. Since clickers are blind and move by echolocation, for this game of messed up tag, Ellie must close her eyes and listen for when the children give themselves away. The thought was that these kids are in relative safety. They still grow up with the dangers of clickers and runners, and all those lessons would embed themselves in the games that they play. When the festival got cut, they tried to preserve this moment and move it to the front of the game where the snowball fight is, as a tutorial. However, being in the headspace of a clicker doesn't really teach you how to deal with them. Eventually,
Ma che
it
cazzo
evolved, and they
è?
instead made the snowball fight, which was, I think, way more effective. For me, it's character illuminating that not only does Ellie know this game, she plays along. There's a familiarity with the kids that's really nice to see, especially because it's such a difference from the Ellie we see later, who has a sort of hollow normalcy that she's trying to get with JJ, but kind of fails.
E l'hanno tolta questa cosa, cioè era una figata. Una figata assurda. C'è altro da vedere. Largo gente! Ho creduto. Che figo! No. No, 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 io adesso devo per forza colpire. Pazzesco. No, no, lo voglio rifare. Non me la fa rifare. Vabbè. Sono altre vignette che posso vedere. No, ce n'è una qua però.
There's a hidden spot at the back that was just a bit of fun. It was highlighting Jackson's normalcy with something we would find in a real world. In the back, you would find teenagers finding some alone time with each other in a dark corner of a party. It was rewarding the player for peeking into a hidden corner, but ultimately redirecting them back to the festival. We also had versions of them smoking weed here, despite Maria's consternation, probably having gotten it from Eugene.
Ah, ecco. Vabbè, penso che questo Lost Levels finisca appunto con Maria qui. Tommy. E si entrava. Ok, una figata. È una figata. Devo dire la verità. Peccato che l'abbiano tolto. Mi sembrava abbastanza figa. Senza divulgarci troppo in chiacchiere, andiamo a Fogne di Seattle. Vediamo un po'. Vediamo un po' cosa ci riserva Fogne di Seattle. Comunque, boh, questa festa di Jackson era carina. Fogne di Seattle.
In this second deleted level, which is an extended sequence of the sewers in Seattle. This comes on the heels of where Ellie goes into a building and she survives an attack by stalkers and gets thrown out of the window and gets swept away by the current. And then we cut this section that used to be there in the final game. Now you will get to play it. So this was a way to get a bit more interesting puzzles, interesting traversal, figure out how Ellie can navigate the sewers with the fighting current. Ultimately, with a lot of these levels and these sequences, the reason why we cut them were for pacing purposes. But here it is for you in this very kind of raw form that part of it will feel finished, parts of it will feel like assets are missing as far as audio, animation won't be final, but it's a glimpse into what a game looks like when it's months away from finishing. Enjoy.
Grazie di nuovo Neil. Vediamo cosa ci serve. Ah ok, questa sequenza qua me la ricordo. Eccola. No. Oh, questo c'è l'audio. Sì, questa sequenza qua me la ricordo. Oh. Ok, questa parte qua mi ricordo che io c'avevo tanta. Ah, questa parte così non c'era. O forse sì. Ah sì, il fatto di lottare contro la corrente, sì. Oh no. Devo toccare indietro. Oddio, così. Ok. Questa parte qua per esempio non c'era.
Odio Seattle.
Non c'era assolutamente. Odio Seattle, ok.
Ne vediamo lo solo.
The ladder
Qua?
acts as an immediate goal for the player, but being able to climb out is not going to be so easy. To keep levels interesting and engaging, we alternate between positive and negative values the player experiences. Here, it's a positive to have found a ladder, but then a negative to discover it's not the solution. But then another positive to identify the next short-term goal of the doorway. By alternating between these opposing values, we give players what they
perché è
expect,
rotta.
but not how they expect it.
Senti, questa scala qua è rotta. E quindi cosa ci tocca fare? Ah, quindi andare dall'altra parte, ok. Giustamente. Dobbiamo mai renderci le cose facili? Eh no.
This level,
What?
internally known as Find Nora, was quite long in duration as we had to make Ellie traverse a far distance
Che forse ho
to the
capito
opposite
qua cosa
side
devo
of
fare.
downtown Seattle. The sewer section was originally longer than what we released the game with, approximately 10 minutes more. This was one of the few areas of the game that used water flow as part of a traversal puzzle. The player has to go upstream to use the current to get to the platform to reach the other side. We mostly cut this mechanic game wide, however it remained in essence in the section swimming to the aquarium as Ellie when you were avoiding the waves. When players reach the doorway and enter into the room, they're faced with a dead end. The real reason for this dead-end room is that on the reversal when exiting back out of the doorway, players are faced with the route onwards. A pipe that they've not been able to see when they were swept past it on the way in, and something that was hidden from view when on the side platforms. The intention here being that the only option is to go off the standard path in order to search for a way out.
Beh, avevo capito che dovevo andare di qua. Ok, cazzo di cane.
Throughout the rest of the level, we also used light to indicate to the player that they were heading in the right direction. At each turn, however, we blocked the direct route forward. Players would know that they just have to keep finding alternative paths, promoting those feelings of being desperate and trapped. We slowly introduced the player to consider climbing into smaller pipes and crouching in these tight spaces.
Devo andare di qua.
This is to slowly build up to and encourage the player to climb into such a small pipe that they'll have to be crawling on their stomach, which is something that the player previously may not have recognised as a playable space, let alone the desired route they need to take. We added a tiny space just to reward the player's exploration with a pickup item, and we made sure it was something that made sense that you'd find in this area. A canister and all the garbage that had been washed into the sewers from the surface.
Un recipiente.
We loved the idea of making Ellie prone through a tiny dirty pipe in order to get out, as it was a great opportunity to use our prone mechanic. The unique camera setup was created to support crawling in these pipes, as the standard prone camera is much higher above the player. We also created custom collision in order for Ellie to manoeuvre in these tight spaces easily. Initially, the oblong collision capsule around her character caused issues crawling around corners. We put extra effort into the custom corner collision, so the movement experience is as smooth as the main game. In order for the player to feel cramped, claustrophobic and desperate, we'd been enforcing the traversal mechanics that allow for a tight environment which promote these feelings. We introduced the use of the squeeze through so that we can keep the player feeling enclosed and tight, but without repeating the same geometry. Here we change from low ceilings with wider walls to high ceilings and tight walls to change up the spatial pacing and keep the level from repeating itself.
Ok, cioè in poche parole. Allora, cerchiamo un attimo di concentrarci su quello che stiamo giocando, perché sono cose nuove.
Originally, we had the waterline much higher here, so players had to swim through this tight tunnel. However, from watching user test feedback, it was occasionally causing people to discount the route entirely and turn back on themselves. So to avoid any risk of this happening in the final game, we present a lower water level so the tunnel is easy to see and commit to using. Although this isn't as impactful without the prone swim, it's the better decision as it means a smoother experience for the player with no backtracking frustration. As we surface from the water and over the crest of the slope, we reveal what is further in this tunnel. A clicker that has sprouted and the fungus has grown on the sides of the pipe. It was great to see people who user tested this area becoming increasingly worried as we forced the player to squeeze past the fungus and inches away from the clicker's face, all the time not being sure whether the clicker might be alive or attack them. Although we aren't as cruel as to force a clicker attack in such close proximity, we do have a payoff for this moment. This clicker momentarily turned into Joel to show Ellie's PTSD from what happened to Joel at the start of the game. Ultimately, we decided to save this moment for the farm level, as it was more impactful there because it could become the centrepiece of that experience. Whereas in the sewers, we weren't able to make it as much of a narrative point and give it the breathing room and reaction time that it deserves, given the tight space.
Effettivamente volevano farlo partire subito il flashback di Joel, però hanno deciso di portarlo più avanti per renderlo più significativo. Oddio. Ok. Aspetta, c'è un'altra cosa qua. Chiusa.
For the final section, we eventually opened you out into a wider area as you traverse through such tight spaces leading up to this. So changing the environmental pacing makes it begin to feel like we're coming to the end of Ellie's ordeal. An earlier iteration used the current that we'd shown at the start for a slightly tougher traversal puzzle to conclude the sewers. The ladder was clearly visible from most of the area, but the player was faced with a fast-flowing torrent of water they couldn't cross. If the player attempted to jump into the water, they were not able to swim across the ladder due to the water's speed. But instead, they had to traverse the pipe running along the top of the space in order to get across the water. Using this pipe was retained in the iteration we shipped with, as it's the last of the extreme methods Ellie has to undergo in order to escape the sewers, and what she will go through in her pursuit of revenge.
Ma fanculo. Ti pareva? Potevamo andare tutto dritto come... Ma... Vabbè. Ci ho fatto tante cose, non sono mai caduto. E invece ora in Lost Levels dovevo caderci. Vabbè.
Using this pipe was retained in the iteration
Ah,
of
ok,
shifting,
è quello che abbiamo già
as it's the
sentito.
last of the extreme methods Ellie has to undergo in order to escape the sewers, and what she will go through in her pursuit of revenge.
Ok. E si scende giù. Qua?
The last ladder climb is quite lengthy, and although we could have trimmed it down to a shorter climb, we liked how this last segment of the journey built anticipation for whether there was success at the top or not after all you've been through. Ultimately, the ladder exits out into the subway station, which is how it connects in the final game. Ellie then has to find her
però
way to the
manca-
hospital from here, crossing paths with the scars for the first time.
Perché manca un coso. Cioè manca... Ho mancato un coso, ok. Vabbè, una nozione ce la siamo persa. Vabbè, la caccia. Ellie segue dei tracce di sangue fino al negozio abbandonato. Ah, vabbè. Vediamo un po' di che cosa si tratta. Ed è l'ultimo livello perduto. L'ultimo livello che non è stato messo nel gioco finale. La caccia.
For this third and final deleted level, what we call the boar hunt sequence, this was a sequence pretty late in the game. It was right
Ah, questo qua
after the whole
l'abbiamo letto
Seattle
ieri.
Abby
Mi ho letto
sequence
ieri
where,
nel
Abby
diario il fatto
spares
del
Ellie. And
cinghiale.
then we wanted to come back into Ellie's story, but keep it a bit mysterious of how much time has passed, where is Ellie now? So we're coming in on Ellie, and she's following a trail of blood. And we wanted to mirror, in a way, the deer hunt sequence from the first game, but this time do it with a boar. And there's something with Ellie that now she can't let go of this violence. She's pursuing it, even against this innocent animal. This was another opportunity to show how the violence that Ellie has experienced, the violence that she witnessed being afflicted onto Joel, is still sticking with her, and she's still experiencing these PTSD moments. This was a sequence that was pretty far along and was cut pretty late in production. Parts of it are still really rough, but the gameplay, the building blocks were all there. I think you'll have fun to see, like, again, a rough, unfinished sequence that you can play. You can see all the way to the end, and including a cinematic that we end up cutting. And the remnants of the sequence ended up being mentioned in Ellie's journal. So this part of
Esatto,
the story
quello che ho
we
detto io.
developed still made its way into the game as kind of optional stuff that you could read about, but here you get to experience it. So as a reminder, this is pretty rough, months away from being finished, but you get to see it now.
Che figata! Cioè abbiamo letto ieri questa cosa. Ieri o l'altro ieri? No, l'altro ieri l'abbiamo letta. Quindi la caccia al cinghiale. Quindi è
So the
doppiato
boar
anche.
hunt was one of the hardest levels for me to work on. It was a huge challenge with the systems that we had, and we kept trying, but it never felt quite right. Originally, the level happened after the Jackson Festival, which also got cut, but before Farm. Once the festival got cut, it became the prologue to Farm. The intended experience is that we jump forward in time after the fight with Abby in the theater. We don't know where Dina is. We likely assume she's dead because she was just bleeding out. Ellie is alone. Her hair is short. So maybe this is the future or the present. And she's hunting. Hunting who? Abby still?
Ah, questo quindi doveva essere una sorta di mistero. Mistero che magari
In
poteva
early
essere
iterations of
Abby.
the fight, it was more arena-like. The player slowly whittles down the boar's health. Ellie gets more visceral and more vicious. We get a little worried about her. As the boar gets weaker, more panicked, more feral, and we start feeling sympathetic to the boar, was the hope. In all of these iterations, especially of these wider areas, it required custom AI and scripting to make sure it continued to feel organic as an animal, but we really needed it to do specific stuff. It needed to be able to close distances really, really quickly. It needed to charge to attack, but we wanted the feeling of hunting, so we needed to track it down from afar. And we also needed to discourage the player from attacking the boar when it's that close, or it would kind of turn into this melee kerfuffle. How do we do this in our world while keeping the boar believable? We must have gone through 5 or 6 iterations of the boar fight and all, and every single time it changed pretty drastically. We split it into clear phases, where one was like all long range, We tried another where you're getting close and you get the jump on it quite literally. You're jumping off of a rock to attack it. And then finally, we tried a bunch where you almost sort of go around a bunch of trailers and try and wrestle it. We uncovered after some time that taking down a boar over several phases felt very laborious and a little dramatic. It was comically long, it felt too boss-like, a little too gamey. We decided to cut the first few phases, and we opted for a cold open after the boar had already been hurt off screen. So that allowed us to focus on feeling like we're closing in on prey and to introduce the boar when it was at its most dangerous. Already hurt, already feral, much too close for comfort. And so the thinking was it would bring us more into Ellie's mindset. Is this really hunting for food, or is she hunting for some other reason?
Effettivamente è anche questo che mi stavo chiedendo, se è un fatto di fame o una cosa
The
proprio
gas
sua
station
interna.
was built to highlight the boar's destructiveness. Since it's cramped, the boar feels larger. We also feel trapped with it, though perhaps it's trapped with us. When it charges, it gets to us quickly, so we must be on our toes.
Okay.
This made it more aligned with Ellie's sort of hunting for trouble mindset. Listening became more important, as well as moving around slowly so it didn't hear you. Could you spot it before it saw or heard you? And could you get a shot off quickly enough so you could dodge out of the way? Or is the shot worth the cost after? It feels like a gamble. By the end of the fight, everything would likely be in shambles. And Ellie would follow it and finally enact.
Oh cazzo! Allora, questo è cioè tipo boss fight con un cinghiale. Ho preso la testa. Ho preso la testa. Tutto stronzo, vieni qua.
The boar kill
The
was supposed to
bastard.
be anything but glorious. With the boar whimpering at the back of the gas station after Ellie's relentless
scampo.
hunt. After this,
No. No. Bruttissimo. Cioè, avevo immaginato la scena quando l'ho letto sul diario, però questa qua è proprio brutto, brutto, brutto. Sopravvive a una serie di scontri generati casualmente in sessioni di stile roguelike. Quindi abbiamo senza ritorno in modalità di sopravvivenza, una serie di scontri in senza ritorno la morte è permanente. Le armi, gli oggetti, i potenziamenti acquisiti si ripristinano dopo la conclusione. Per ogni partita viene generata casualmente una nuova mappa. Nuova partita standard. Diciamo intermedio. Primo personaggio, cominciarci di un personaggio. Ogni personaggio ha uno specifico equipaggiamento. Divertenza, una serie di tratti distintivi. Possibile sbloccare nuovi personaggi completando le sfide. Ellie, Tina. Combatto sconti con Ellie. Ah, vabbè, sono i comandi normali. Dopo ogni combattimento fai ritorno a questo rifugio. Completa gli sconti per ottenere ricompense, quindi usa il banco del lavoro e accedi all'emporio per potenziare il tuo personaggio. Lavagna tattica. Usa la lavagna tattica per selezionare il tuo prossimo sconto e farti strada verso il boss finale. Gli sconti differiscono per luogo, fazione nemica, modificatori e condizioni di vittoria.
Ok,
Ah.
ci siamo.
Ah. Dopo ogni scontro, ok, quindi noi avremo pezzi di ricambio dopo ogni scontro. Qua? Ah, ok. Ah, ho capito. Vai, Jackson, assalto Jackson, vai. Mi hanno detto che se moriamo la morte è permanente. Probabilmente morirò subito. Assalto. Gruppi di nemici attaccano ondate. La loro conoscenza della tua posizione iniziale varia in base allo scontro. Sfrutta gli intervalli tra le ondate. Una classe di scorta. Assalto. E spinge ogni ondata. Ah, ma siamo a Jackson. Ondata in arrivo. Posso raccogliere le cose qua.
Non hai visto niente?
Ah.
Non ho visto nessuno.
Fanculo.
Andrew! Ci attaccano!
Così diretto, vai. Ah, ok. Erano questi tre. Cassa di scorte. Ok, munizioni. Mi danno le munizioni, a posto. Bella sta macchina. Ok, spuntano di là. Mi creo pure queste. Chissà mai. Ondata 2 di 3. Minchia, però ce la potevo mettere pure la cam qui, eh. Ora ci sto pensando. Ok. Colpo alla testa. Cioè, sei scappata, sì. Colpo alla testa pure di qua. Ah. Quindi sono 3 ondate. Ah, quindi abbiamo soltanto la pistola. Ottimo. Mi raccolgo munizioni se loro le hanno lasciate. Due. Ah, quindi sono sempre 3 di loro. Ma vaffanculo. Assorati. Scontro completato. A posto. Ritorno al rifugio. Sono 14 secondi. Vabbè, dai, non è stato chissà quanto male. Anzi, lo ritengo anche figo come modalità. Dai, che stiamo tornando anche al rifugio. Figo. Figo, davvero, figo. Prestazione, completamente sconto. Deve completamento 3 minuti e 22. Danni subiti 0. Precisione 69. Mocca assorta. Nessun alleato. Eliminazioni furtive. Uccisioni di mischia. Colpi alla testa. Totale scontro 637. Io ho preso. Ah. Ci sta, Ci sta a prendere A. Completo gli scontri con Ellie, quindi abbiamo fatto già 1 su 2 per Dina. Visualizzare il menu principale senza ritorno. Ok. Ok, ok. Senza scontro. C'è Emporio. Qua. Ah, ok. Ci hanno dato i premi. Che è la cassa dei premi. Qui silenziatori. Molotov migliorate. E poi qua posso anche migliorare un po' la pistola. Magari. Questa. Tempia fitta. Combattimento ravvicinato. Fase scontro. Assalto. Io nemici. Conti pesare i modificatori. Non è possibile sbloccare i modificatori completando le sfide. Va bene. Va bene, va bene, va bene. Ah, quindi abbiamo come alleato Dina. Ok, perfetto. Respinge ogni ondata. Empia fitta. Dina. Pronta? Quanti ne vengono? Saranno di più. Infatti ne sono 4. E me l'ho buttata via.
Sono qui, le vedo!
Oh merda. Oh cazzo. Brava Dina, brava. 2. 3. Dina, la cazzo di scorte sta qui. Ah, così poche munizioni mi dai? Oh, cazzo. Cioè, se ne avete così poche mi dato. Dove sono questi? Ok, ne sono sempre 4.
Le ho viste!
Zoe!
Aia.
Sta correndo!
Cazzo è questo? Aia.
Maledizione!
Ah, mi ha spezzato. Ma io mi sto morendo.
E adesso?
Mi sto morendo, Dina. Detto tutto. Quella che se scorta. Sembrano delle scorte, mi sembrano delle scorte. Inizioni ce l'ho al massimo. Minchia, c'aveva la torcia accesa.
Katie! È un'imboscata, cazzo! Veni qua, brutta stronza!
E gli vado a brutta stronza.
Faccio io!
Oh cazzo, guarda questo. Brutto stronzo.
Ok.
Tutto completato, che bello. Ah. No, che figata comunque. Che se ride. Stavano praticamente facendo il culo, tu ridi. Non sei scema, Ellie. Puzze scema veramente. Allora, tempo di completamento 4 minuti. Danni subiti 118, faccio cazzo. Precisione 80, rispetto a prima meglio. Ah, abbiamo preso B. Mi ha sbloccato Dina. Completa i secondi con Dina per sbloccare Jessie. Ah, ho capito, ho capito, ho capito, ho capito. Via. Ecco su. Oh, è qua? Ah, posso comprare le armi. Ah, potevo farmi i cazzi miei, Mettiamoci le munizioni. Cazzo, devo dire. C'è anche un po' di capacità in più. A posto. Comunque ragazzi, va bene così. Dopo questo lungo video tra Lost Levels e Senza Ritorno, io non so che altro dirvi. Ragazzi, abbiamo finito The Last of Us Parte 2. Lasciamo il fatto che ci mancano le sfide da fare qua. Però per me la serie può finire qua. Quindi grazie di cuore a tutti. Io con Ellie, il nostro carissimo amore, vi mandiamo un saluto. Che dire, è un po' malinconica questa cosa. Un po' malinconica. Vabbè, torniamo al menù. Ragazzi, allora, Lost Levels l'abbiamo finito. Che dire, sono sequenze, sì, ok, ci hanno spiegato pure i produttori, che comunque se avessero messo queste scene si sarebbe perso un po' il ritmo del gioco. Però, cioè, per me ci sarebbe stato un casino, ma soprattutto magari metterle nel gioco finale di adesso, della Remastered, cioè sarebbe stato molto figa come cosa, senza metterceli in disparte, però giustamente erano livelli non completi, erano sequenze non migliorate, non finite. Grazie per aver seguito The Last of Us con me, sono felicissimo per averlo portato tutto finalmente sul canale. Ripeto, è il mio gioco preferito, non potevo non portarlo, non potevo non farlo stare su questo canale. E nulla, raga, questa serie è finita. Domani iniziamo una nuova serie e preparatevi che sarà una bomba. Bella.